Good afternoon, students. Welcome back to the day 2 of the 5-day workshop on creative thinking and academic writing, jointly organized by Dean Research and Consultancy and Center for Professional Development of Urdu Medium Teachers, CPDUMT, Maulana Azad, National Urdu University. Today, we have with us Professor Satish Kumar Podwal as our resource person. Professor Satish Kumar Podwal is Professor, Department of Culture Studies at the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. He currently holds the Post-Colonial Chair in Global Modernities at University of Potsdam, Germany. Earlier, he has been a visiting professor at the Technological University of Dresden and lectured at universities Minnesota, Philadelphia, Berlin, Munich, etc., and different parts of India also. He has edited book titled Refiguring Culture, History, Theory, and the Aesthetics in Contemporary India, and also authored a book titled Acts of Culture, Creativity, Dissent, and Aesthetic Domain in Contemporary in India, published by Orient Black Swan. He is part of the editorial team of online film archive indiacine.ma. Now I request Professor Satish Kumar Podwal to come onto the virtual platform to deliver his lecture. That's it, to deliver.
Okay. Hello and good afternoon, friends. My name is Satish, and as Subhash just told you, I teach at the English and Foreign Languages University. By training, I am a student of literary and cultural studies, and that's what I do in my professional work. But I am also, happy to say that I have done the postgraduate diploma in teacher training from the CIEFL. So I know a little bit about ELT as well. And one of my long-standing concerns as a teacher of English and teacher of English literature and media studies has been that research students and future teachers need to have a sense of professional skills in order to do their research as well as their teaching effectively. So after a long time, when I was invited to be part of this online workshop on research skills and writing skills, I was a bit hesitant at first because I normally don't do teacher training workshops or ELT workshops, which is where this routinely happens in my university. But then when Professor Salma Faruqi once met me and we talked about training students for this kind of professional work. I mean, we basically come out of MA and start doing research, and after completing research, somehow we start teaching. But not enough attention, I feel, has been paid to some of the skills which go into, doing your research, presenting your research work, publishing it, and later on, when you go on to be a teacher, this becomes an everyday part of your profession. So workshops like this, I regard as very important. So it's an opportunity for us to learn something that we tend to learn by doing in most Indian universities. I mean, we don't have any structured input in research methodology. So I'm very happy that MANUU is now doing this in a structured and formal way. And even though this is going to be an online workshop, and there are limitations, because if this were happening in a classroom, we would have done a lot of activities where you would have done some practical task and we would have shared with ideas with each other, our work with each other, and learned horizontally. That is not just from the teacher, but also learned from each other by doing these tasks. This is somewhat difficult to do online, but we will still try and manage. I'm not going to make you do any tasks because I don't know how we would manage that. What I'm planning to do today is to speak for around 45 to 50 minutes to start off. And I will raise a number of points about how to go about, the process of writing academic papers, your term papers for now, your dissertation at a later stage, and when you join the profession and have to publish regularly, what are some of the things involved in academic writing? How is academic writing different from other forms of writing? What are the things that you have to keep in mind? So we will discuss some of these issues, both the general principles that organize this field called academic writing, as well as specific, skills or specific principles of activity that you have to keep in mind. So this is what I will speak for about 45 to 50 minutes. Following that, where in the normal course we would have had a writing workshop, you can, on the basis of what I say and maybe also on the basis of what I failed to cover today, you can ask any questions that you have or suggestions that you may have about how to go about writing. So with that preliminary, I will start today's session. I want to thank Dr. A. Subhash as well as Professor Salma Farooqi for inviting me. I'm very happy to be part of this workshop. Okay, let me begin. I have a PowerPoint, so I'll share my slide. Can you see it now?
See it.
Is it visible?
It has gone, sir. It's
gone.
1 second. Yeah, it's visible, sir.
It's visible. Okay. So let us start. Let's begin with the question of what is academic writing? At a very simple level, and I don't mean to be facetious or humorous about it. Seriously, what is academic writing? It is professional writing of the academics, by the academics, for the academics. At one level, this is what distinguishes academic writing from all other forms of writing. This means that when you are writing in this terrain of the academy, you have to keep in mind that your primary readers are going to be those who are your colleagues within the academy, your peers or your superiors. Never forget this, because very often when you just come out of a MA type of level, you tend to think that you are doing something for society. It is true, you are doing something for society, but you would do well to remember that your primary audience is going to be your research supervisor. It is going to be your external examiner. It's going to be an editor of a journal. So those are the kind of people you are immediately writing for. And there are certain principles that are involved in the way that they would evaluate your writing. So you are not immediately writing for the world at large. Very often people tend to forget this simple fact. Having said this, let me also remind myself and you that some of the basic principles of good writing remain the same in all kinds of writing, academic and non-academic writing. So, for example, all writing needs to have a good introduction, a coherent kind of a middle, and an emphatic or a convincing kind of an ending. Those of you who remember your reading of Alice in Wonderland would remember the wonderful instruction or lesson in good writing when the king tells the rabbit, he said, "Where should I begin?" The rabbit asks, and the king says, "Begin at the beginning, go on till you reach the end, then stop." I mean, it's the best kind of advice that you can get in writing. This is put in a different way in terms of academic writing, where one person humorously put it like this. At first, you have to begin by saying, tell them what you are going to tell them. Tell them what you are going to tell them, then tell them, and in the end, tell them that you have told them. This is the overall structure: introduction, middle or body, and the conclusion. Now, all kinds of writing, whether it is an informal essay, whether it's a newspaper article, whether it is a descriptive essay, a travelogue, or in fact, academic writing, all writing will have this kind of an overall structure. There's a good beginning, a good middle, and a good end. So that is fine. There is no problem with that. Academic writing, however, seems to suffer from some kind of negative publicity because it tends to be a bit difficult, a bit labored, a bit boring, a bit clumsy or unreadable or too technical, jargon-ridden. So many people think that academic writing is an embodiment of bad writing, everything that is bad about writing. When I first joined the Central Institute of English and Foreign Languages, there was this common joke. You may have heard one or the other version of this, which said, those who can do, those who can't teach, those who can't teach become teacher trainers, and those who can't train teachers become philosophers of education. And at each level, the quality of writing apparently deteriorates in the sense of it becomes more difficult. I am aware that such jokes or such negative characterizations of academic writing exist, but my effort today would be to urge you, as a fellow academic who has been in this field for more than 25 years now, that academic writing is a skill that you need to learn. It doesn't come naturally to anybody. And especially in the Indian academic system, right from school to our graduation or even post-graduation, we just write answers to expected questions. So we have a sense of what the teacher wants to hear, and we are constantly writing what we think are good answers to what the teacher wants to hear. However, when you come to research, here you are supposed to do original work. You are supposed to do new work. There are jokes about research just means repeating what other people have already done, which is not true. Research doesn't mean searching again and again. It is not simply a question of reinventing the wheel again and again. If you think about it seriously, of course, wheels need to be reinvented. I mean, if you open that joke out, you would see that the earliest forms of wheels would just have been a branch of a tree cut, sawed through half, and then you put an axle through it. It would have been an extremely uncomfortable type of a wheel. When that wheel was reinvented, somebody would have put an iron ring around it to make it last longer. At some other point, somebody put rubber around it to make it softer. Then somebody came up with an inflatable, tube inside that rubber. Somebody came up with the kind of tire that would fit into a tractor or an aeroplane. Somebody came up with, a kind of tire that would drive. What are these machines that you see on the road? Mining machines or digging machines with metal wheels. So, of course, tires have to be reinvented all the time. There's nothing wrong in reinventing the wheel. Research, similarly, is not simply a question of repeating what others say. Research is a question of revisiting a field in which some arguments have been presented and finding what needs to be done to take those conclusions forward. Or if you think that there's something limiting or wrong with those conclusions, how to correct them or how to suggest an alternative way forward. So in that sense, research is repetitive. It goes back to the ground already trodden. But the importance of research in a serious sense is that it adds to our knowledge. And the academic community is a community that seriously thinks about, not about common sense. This is not to say that common sense is bad, but our task as academics is to look at certain issues seriously and to look at them rigorously and to share them with a fellow audience of peers so that they can assess it with the same seriousness and rigor that ordinary people may not have the training to do it or the interest or the time to do it. So there's nothing per se bad or contemptible, if you like, about academic writing. And if you begin to take it seriously, rather than just stuff your language with jargon or bad prose, if you take academic writing seriously and if you learn to write academically effectively, then you would be in a position to add to knowledge. So to start off, let me just make one preliminary point that any kind of good writing requires clear thinking. If your thinking is clear, if your purpose is clear, then your writing will improve. You just keep practicing how to think clearly and present your thoughts effectively, your writing will improve. The only thing is, if you are doing it for a college magazine or a newspaper or a letter to your parents, you would do it in one way. But when you are writing for other professionals who you don't personally know, then you have to write in a formal way and in a way that they would find effective and convincing. We'll come to those details in a second. Now, some of the key differences between academic and non-academic writing involves the set of differences that you see at the left hand of the screen. The readership is different. Academics versus family or friends or nephews, niece, whoever, neighbors. The content is serious thought. You are thinking aloud about matters that other people have thought seriously about, and you are commenting on what others have seriously thought about. Whereas in non-academic writing, you are basically adopting a conversational tone in a relaxed kind of way. The style in academic writing tends to be complex because the thoughts are complex, the arguments are complex. Whereas in non-academic context, you are just talking, you are thinking aloud, and you are making simple sentences. And it can be compound, but by adding small words. The organization has to be clear and well planned. I'll come to this later in the talk. Whereas in non-academic, in a letter or an email or an SMS that you send, it can be, the idea there is to be brief and quick and get the main idea across. You don't necessarily have to use, even complete sentences there. And finally, the vocabulary here has to be accurate. It has to be precise. What people dismiss as jargon is just a way of being precise and correct for fellow professionals. Whereas in non-academic writing, you can use idioms, slangs, colloquialisms, other kinds of expressions. Okay. Somewhere around 2014, this man you see in the screen is a very well-known writer, Steven Pinker. He's a right-wing or a conservative type of a thinker who is an academic, but who also writes books that are bestsellers. He writes in newspapers. In late 2014, he published an essay called Why Academics Stink at Writing. And as you can imagine from the title, it was a front-on assault on what he regarded as bad and verbose type of academic writing. So just to give you a flavor of what he was arguing in that essay, this is what Steven Pinker says. And I'm quoting him, but I'm not necessarily endorsing what he's saying. You will get a sense of that later. But just to give you a sense of what Pinker wrote in this piece, he says, why should a profession that trades in words and dedicates itself to the transmission of knowledge so often turn out prose that is turgid, soggy, wooden, bloated, clumsy, obscure, unpleasant to read, and impossible to understand? And then he went on. This is a question. It's a rhetorical kind of a question. Why should people write so badly? And then he says, the most popular answer outside the academy is the cynical one. Bad writing is a deliberate choice. Why? Because people or scholars in the softer fields spout obscure verbiage to hide the fact that they have nothing to say. They dress up the trivial and the obvious with the trappings of scientific sophistication, hoping to bamboozle their audience with highfalutin gobbledygook. So this is the kind of, you can say it's a semi-formal type of a newspaper essay. He is communicating with a large body of readers working with, a literate kind of common sense. And he is writing about other academics who do not write like this, but who write essays in, and this is a article published in the Chronicle of Higher Education. So he's talking about the kind of essays that are published on higher education, and which he thinks is unreadable, is pretentious, is boring. Now, this essay by Steven Pinker elicited a lot of discussion. Many people were happy that he is attacking bad writing, but there were a number of others who were concerned about this kind of a populist common sense and attack on academic writing. So to give you a sense of responses to it, Larry Grossberg, a professor in media and communication studies, he said, it's interesting that we expect scientists to have a technical vocabulary, but when it comes to the most complex system we know of, namely human social existence, we somehow think we don't need a technical vocabulary to describe it. I mean, this is because Pinker said in the softer fields, Pinker said that he doesn't have a problem if engineers or surgeons write in a technical language. But when professors of English or education or media studies or communication studies start using a vocabulary that is difficult to understand at first sight, then he has a problem with it. So the response to that from Larry Grossberg is why? I mean, because we are dealing with something that is very often even more complicated than a rocket or a train on rails. We are dealing with human beings who think, who aspire, who are cunning, who hate each other, who are competing with each other. And to understand those complexities within literature, within cinema, or within sociology requires a vocabulary that fairly represents the complexities involved. So if people come up not with commonsensical words or ready-made words for it, but to try and separate out what lies, the reality that lies behind those words or behind the common sense, then you need to develop an accurate and precise language for it. This is what many academics do. So this is one defense of academic writing. Another person called Rachel Cayley was worried about the effects that Pinker's kind of commonsensical attack on academic writing would have. She said, two groups of people may actually be negatively affected by Pinker's critique. First, there are those who wish to believe that academics are engaged in an inherently meaningless and solipsistic enterprise. It's all a waste of time. This group will certainly find solace in Pinker's critique. But second, there are those who already feel daunted by the prospect of joining the academy. This group will likely feel discouraged by the view that even if you succeed as an academic writer, the accomplishment will always be clouded by a lack of respect. So there would be this continuous jokes or assaults or dismissal of your effort to write seriously, precisely for fellow academics. It will always be dismissed as Pinker put it, gobbledygook, highfalutin gobbledygook. So Rachel Cayley said that while some of Pinker's criticism of very needlessly obscure writing is well taken, but the broad-based assault on academic writing is misplaced. And finally, there was another person who wrote an online article. This was a young person deciding whether to stay in academic or journalism or move on to creative writing or some other field. So he's somebody who writes online. He made the point that rants about unintelligibility of academic writing have become a genre all of their own. But jargon and specialized terminology have their place in certain niches, and there's nothing inherently wrong with difficulty. And he went on to give this example of, French post-structuralist thinkers are supposed to be very, very, notoriously difficult to read. But he said, you just spend some time with the kind of philosophical tradition they are working within or they take for granted. So if you spend some time with Immanuel Kant or Friedrich Hegel, then you would see how easily you breeze through reading Foucault or Derrida or Lyotard. So it's just because you don't have the background, you do not share the assumptions or share the vocabulary, the precise vocabulary that they are using. So therefore, you tend to think that they are being needlessly obscure. And Josh John said that is not the case. Their obscurity begins where your laziness ends. Once you start doing the work, their work becomes proportionately simpler. So this is the discussion at large about academic writing. Let me move on. I will now talk about, and this is where we get into the specifics about what constitutes academic writing, some of its features. I'll quickly run through 7 points. So you see this is a 7-pointed star here. So 7 features of academic writing. It is structured. It is based on evidenced. It is critical. It is precise. It is balanced, objective, and formal. There is some overlap here, but let me say a sentence each about what each of these means. It is structured in the sense it has an introduction which is a thesis. Some call it a hypothesis or starting assumption, but it's an argument that you are going to make and defend. So academic writing has a thesis. It has an introduction. It then goes on to discuss that thesis. It anticipates objections. It refers to existing work. It evaluates them. It takes a position in relation to them, and it arrives at a certain conclusion. And in the discussion, there may be, which is called the body of the essay, there would be 3, 4, depending on the length. There could be chapters, there could be paragraphs, each of which discusses a specific point. It's called, having a topic sentence. One main idea that you introduce in a paragraph, you discuss it, you reference it, evaluate it, and push towards the conclusion. And in the conclusion, you basically say, in the light of what you have done, this is what you hope to have demonstrated or proved, or this is what you believe. But this belief is not just opinion, it's based on facts, analysis of facts, and analysis of counter arguments. So academic writing is structured in this way. Related to this, it is not just a string of opinions. Opinions and arguments have to be supported by evidence, not just any evidence. It has to be evidence acceptable to other experts in the field. You have to refer to the same set of facts or reasons, examples, statistics, citations. When we are discussing it, maybe you will have questions about each of this. So, for example, what about facts or statistics that experts have not looked at? What if you were to do new kind of field work in your village and come up with data from there? Yeah, sure. But you have to work with a framework of what would constitute acceptable field work, reliable field work. And we can talk about it later. So now let me run through with this. It is critical in the sense it does not just accept what is published by others. Information that is gathered, arguments that have been made by others are analyzed and evaluated before judgment is given. It is precise and not casual, or it would not have slang or colloquial language. It would be precise and serious, and it would have discipline specific terms. Each discipline has a set of terminology framework that is understood by, appreciated by people who are within the discipline. So your contribution is within the discipline. Very often you will draw on terms from other disciplines or cognate disciplines, allied disciplines. But whatever it is, the idea is that in academic writing, you will be drawing on terminology that is precise and understood by your community of experts. So it is precise in this sense. It is balanced in the sense it considers all sides. All sides may not be possible. Sometimes you consider all relevant sides of the argument on the topic on which you are talking, and you avoid conscious bias. The idea is you should present it in such a way that the focus is on the argument and the quality of the argument, not on the kind of person who is making the argument or the ideology that seems to drive that argument. It's easier said than done, but at least when you are writing, you have to present your arguments in such a way that somebody doesn't feel you're being obviously biased. Hedges and boosters are used. These are technical terms. I will just say a sentence or two about them and move on. Having said that bias should be avoided, it is true that everybody has their own preferences, their own conscious or unconscious preferences and biases. You do your best to avoid them in writing, but you also show your preferences. Hedges are where you say it appears to be the case that. You do not say this is so. You say it appears to be the case. Evidence points in this direction. That would be what is a hedge. You're not making a emphatic assertion for which you don't have full evidence. You're just looking at the evidence and saying that based on evidence, this seems to be the case. You're hedging there. And a booster is where you promote or emphasize a certain preference. So you would a booster would be something like all this data seems to indicate that, or seems to point to the fact that. That would be a booster. Again, it's not a conclusion. You're not saying this is the truth. You're saying all evidence seems to lead to the conclusion that. That is a booster. That is the maximum you would go in hedging or boosting your argument. I hope that is clear. Finally, penultimately, it is objective. This is a somewhat contentious type of point, because very often some people insist, and some research guides insist, that you should use only a passive voice and impersonal sentences. You should never have I or we in your dissertation or in your article. This is not a hard and fast rule. Let me say this now. I, for one, do not believe this. I, for one, do not believe that if you use the word I and you make an argument based on your sense of being in the field, your observation, and then back it up, not just with your opinion, but analysis of data, analysis of facts, analysis of other scholars' arguments, I think there is nothing wrong with that. You can use an active voice, a personal sentence. I, for one, think this is not a problem. But very often you will see many books on academic writing where beginners will be told, learn to use the passive voice. The emphasis should be on information, not on yourself, not on your reader. Don't resort to this humanism of, I am telling you, please believe me. That kind of impassioned conversational appeals that you make in real life is not what has to happen in academic writing. So on the whole, people say that beginners should learn to think in a new way when they are involved in academic argumentation. So the emphasis should be on information and arguments, not on the writer or not on the reader, not on the personal views or feelings or memories of human beings, but on information and arguments. That is what is meant by objective. And finally, it is formal. It avoids contractions. You don't say things like I can't or you shouldn't, cannot, should not. It's where you avoid contractions and colloquial expressions. Academic collocations. Look this up at some point. I'm sure all of you are learning English also. So collocations are precise phrases that are used in specific contexts. What is deemed appropriate in academic writing? There's a certain language that is appropriate. In the next slide, I will give you some examples of each of this. Now, moving on, academic versus non-academic writing. I am returning to this distinction in a new way on the basis of the previous slide. So in academic writing, if you look on the left side of the screen, you don't use contractions. There is instead of there's. The test did not show instead of didn't. So this is what is meant by contraction versus full form. The kind of connectors, conjunctions in Ryan and Martin type of grammar books, the kind of connecting phrases or words that you use tend to be more formal in academic writing. So things like the theory appears to provide an explanation for this phenomenon. However, this is not the case on closer examination. Or moreover, the methodology was faulty. Whereas in conversational or casual English, you just say only or anyway. These are examples. I mean, it's not a complete list. There's a long list and you can look it up in other books that teach you academic writing. This is just to give you a sense of the differences in how academic writing works. So on and so forth. I can share this slide with you later if you're interested. But since time is short, and I will not go through the entire list, there's also this point about the use of the passive voice, you would notice down there in the middle. In recent years, several analyses of survey data have been published. Instead of, in recent years, researchers have published several analyses of survey data. The point of view, objective and impersonal, this essay attempts to, instead of in my essay, I will attempt to. One possible reason may be, instead of rhetorical questions, how can this be? How can we tolerate this? The idea is not, you avoid questions like that. Moral judgments, rhetorical questions are to be avoided. Okay. Now, the structure of an academic essay, as I said at the beginning, it's a fairly straightforward thing. You need an introduction, you need a middle, and you need a conclusion. Most academic essays have the same format. In the introduction, you have to say, what is the situation now? Situation in the sense of, if you are writing about, higher education or Telugu cinema or Indian politics or the poetry of Seamus Heaney, whatever it is that you're working on, it could be a whole range of things. The situation refers to what is the existing state of the field of scholarship related to that topic. What is the contemporary understanding of this topic and how is it different from earlier understanding of it? And is it the same in all kinds of spaces? I mean, so for example, poetry or economics, the way it is understood, politics or popular cinema, the way in which popular cinema is understood in Hyderabad or Madras, how is it different from how popular cinema is understood in, say, Tokyo or Los Angeles? It could be different. So when you are looking at popular cinema in Hyderabad, you would look at a number of facts and factors that perhaps somebody studying popular Hollywood cinema does not have to look at. So you would have to specify that within this field, the context of Hyderabad introduces a number of important specificities that you have to look at. So in the introduction, you would acknowledge and factor in these things, signal these things. Sometimes you do it, if it's a PhD dissertation, you would do it as a whole chapter. But if you're writing a short essay or an article for publication, you would say it in a sentence or two and give footnotes that indicate some of these differences. If it's an evaluation, who is it good for, who is it bad for? Reasons why. This is meant by looking at arguments and analyzing them, evaluating them. It doesn't have to be good or bad. It could be, now that the coronavirus pandemic is there, Who is affected in what way? Urban versus rural, rich versus poor, or is it the same for everybody? Uh, is it more? Why is it more in certain coastal regions, not in other coastal regions? So based on that, it's not your opinion from on the basis of what you have read in newspapers or heard on television or received as a WhatsApp forward. You would look at uh, reliable data put out by governments or other reliable agencies. You would look at what scholarly writing exists on that topic. You would analyze it. You would summarize it fairly, not misrepresent it. You would summarize it in a fair way and then take a position. Do you agree? If you do, then what follows from it? Do you disagree? Why do you disagree? What is at stake in the disagreement? So those kinds of things would happen in the middle part of the essay. And based on that, you would reach a conclusion which you hope your reader will agree with. So another way in which this is structured in a dissertation, for example, would be the mapping of the field, identifying a research gap, making a claim about what needs to be done. Why is your research important? And giving some idea about the methodology that you would be using. So that would be an introductory chapter. It would then be followed in some cases by a literature review, in other cases by discussing methodology. How will this research be done? With what materials or subjects? How many? What would constitute evidence? Here you have to be careful, and many of us who come into academy sometimes don't understand the difference between, say, an assumption, an argument, and an assertion. An assumption would be something that you are assuming. In everyday life, you would say things like, I guess it will rain. I guess Sachin Tendulkar is a good batsman. I reckon that the rains will arrive late this year. These are just assumptions that you are making. There is no proof or evidence for it. So in real life, we make a set of assumptions about a number of things. Even in research, you begin with certain assumptions, but you have to be very clear that you have to move from assumption towards something that is better than a mere assumption. And this can take two forms. Very often, some people lapse into a series of assertions. From assumption, you just say, I strongly believe that, or there is no doubt that. So these would constitute assertions. You are just asserting something without proof. To move from assertion to argument, you would have to train yourself. You would have to pick up the skill of summarizing other arguments, different positions that exist, evaluating them, and taking a position in relation to that. That is what would constitute argument. And while learning to write as an academic, you have to move from mere assumptions, from mere assertions towards arguments. And good research is about engaging with other arguments and coming up with a better argument. So going on, based on what kind of summary and analysis you do and the position that you take in regard to the existing scholarship, you will push towards newer kinds of results that you hope are more satisfactory. And in the conclusion, you would state what is it that you have found. You would say why this matters and what you have perhaps not been able to find and what future research can take forward in this particular field. So most writing, whether it's a short research paper for a journal article or a full PhD dissertation or a monograph, these are the points that you have to keep in mind while structuring an academic essay. Now, I can put this in a graphic way. That is, academic writing follows a clear, linear, progressive structure. That is A, B, C, D, E, one following from the other, one taking an earlier point forward and consolidating it. So, the structure of an academic essay can be thought of like this. There is at the start a main point or thesis that you begin with, and that is presented right at the front. That this dissertation is going to examine or investigate or explore this article assumes that. And you will say, what is it that you are assuming and that you are going to test out in the subsequent essay or dissertation? It's followed by a set of sub-points that work on, which develop and support the main point. So there will be different paragraphs or there will be different chapters which do this work. And this is the bulk of your article or your dissertation, the main body of the text, the sub-points that you develop. And very often within this, people will tell you that you have to follow a certain structure in each of these sub-points, ideally speaking. And some people summarize this as, tier paragraph, not, tear them to shreds or something like that. But each of these paragraphs should have a topic sentence, the evidence to back the claims implicit in the topic sentence, then the analysis of evidence, and then relate it back to the main thesis. So chapter 1 will do it, chapter 2 will do it, chapter 3 will do it. So this is what happens in the middle part, the key and important part. The most important part of your dissertation will be this. Your dissertation will be evaluated on the quality of the work that you do here. And finally, towards the conclusion, the synthesis of the key arguments and the conclusion that you hope to have reached after demonstrating the path that you have traveled and defended it. So this is how any academic essay is structured, is to be structured. Now we move to a somewhat different point that relates to the difference that we made between assumption and assertion versus argumentation. In all academic writing, you have to have a clear sense of the difference between what is a fact and what is only an opinion. Opinion is okay, but leave it at the door or the gate, as they say. Your opinions are important for you personally. It's okay at home. But while working within the university or the academic world, what matters? I mean, your opinion matters, but even more important than your opinions are going to be facts and arguments. So a fact is something that actually exists and is observable, measurable, verifiable. You can discuss this later if you want, if you have objections to any one word. What do you mean it actually exists? What about facts that nobody knows about? No, I mean, you're going to discover a new thing or a new reality. Sure. But that new reality would have to be observable, measurable, verifiable in the physical sciences. And in social sciences and humanities, it would have to be something that can be observed and either agreed upon by your peers, or they can specify why they disagree with you. But it cannot be at the level of alternative kind of realities. So even if you were to say that, say, Jane Austen is perhaps the most important writer of her age because, the insights that she gives into the emerging bourgeois subjectivity that is undergoing transformation, about the rise of women readers and the subjectivities of men and women and their interactions in society, far more interesting than the kind of historical novels that give you a broad sweep but don't give you an insight into how people felt and thought and reacted in everyday life. So if somebody were to say Jane Austen is the most significant and talented writer of her age because of ABC, somebody can say, yes, it is true, she is very good in all this, but if you read Jane Austen's novels, you would not know that England, Europe was under the shadow of the Napoleonic Wars and the big history-making incidents that were happening. And therefore, how can you call her the most important writer? Now, observe that the difference here is you reach different conclusions. Your assumptions, your arguments, your conclusions may be different, but there can be an agreement on fact. The person who does not agree with you that Jane Austen is the most significant writer will nevertheless be able to agree or comment on whether what you are saying about Jane Austen's novels and the kind of characterization, the kind of consciousness, subjectivity that she is able to present in fiction, whether that is an accurate description of Jane Austen's work or not. The person may disagree with your conclusion while still conceding that what you are saying is accurate and tenable. So that is what I mean by facts. You can disagree on facts, but you have to have a shared sense of, given what you are looking for, have you looked at it carefully? Have you looked at it accurately? And then there can be a different point of view about where this leads you in. Your examiner may say, I don't quite agree that she was the most important writer. You are overstating it. You have to keep in mind what she has not looked at also. But you are right that in what she did attempt and succeed in, she is definitely the greatest. This is what I mean by focusing on facts. These are facts. These are not opinions, because you are quoting from the text. You are demonstrating how what you are claiming actually happens in the text. So that is the distinction between fact and opinion. Facts are observable, measurable, verifiable. You can say whether this is true or not. Looking at Jane Austen's text, what you are saying, is it true or not, can be verified. You have to say page number and refer to some letter which she wrote or some other evidence that you present. So you can verify your claim. Whereas an opinion is just a feeling, view, belief, judgment that is not founded on proof. So the distinguishing feature here is the proof. And in academic writing, there are some words or constructions which signal facts and others which signal opinions. So fact signaling devices would be things like numbers, statistics, record, words like substantiate, verified, prove, documented, photograph, something is corroborated by data or a quotation or an eyewitness account of something. These are all in different disciplines, in different genres of academic writing. There are ways in which facts are mobilized and presented. Whereas if you read certain other pieces, your peers may say that there is more opinion here than facts. This would involve judgments about something being good or bad, or the writers believing, using words like I believe, I think, it is always the case. This might be the reason why, I guess, my interpretation is, this should never happen. Judgments of this kind indicate that an opinion is what is being put forward, not a fact. And while opinions have their place in the real world or in everyday conversations, even in a discussion with your teacher or in a classroom debate, facts are what matters most when it comes to writing your dissertation. So since this session is on academic writing, I'm just saying, as far as writing is concerned, the emphasis is on facts. Now, here are some concrete examples that I have taken from business reports, two kinds of business reports where one presents opinions and the other presents facts. So the same kind of data or conclusion is there. The business certainly has a bright future. The business has received 2 offers from interested overseas investors in recent months. So in the right-hand side, you will say that something concrete is offered, something which can be verified. Whereas if you say business certainly has a bright future, how do you verify this? Something is going to happen. Whereas in the right-hand side, something is there, you can verify it. 2 offers have been received from interested overseas investors in recent months. So it shows a recent interest. And if more and more people from abroad are getting interested and are making offers, then chances are that there is a bright future. You get the difference? The customers say the products are excellent. How do we know? You are saying the customers are saying this. Customer surveys indicate an overall net satisfaction rate of 72%. Now here there's some number, and it convinces the reader that some kind of survey has been done. And in that survey, 72% of the people felt. A trained reader will, of course, ask you questions about what is the 72%. How many people did you speak to? Did you speak to 5, 10, or did you speak to 10,000? So if you just spoke to 10 friends and family members, it may not add up to a convincing kind of a fact. Whereas if you ask 10,000 people in different cities, people who you don't know, people who don't have any direct interest in your business, and if they indicate that they are happy with the product that they have bought or used, then it indicates customer satisfaction, and so on and so forth. I won't read the entire thing. The point being that facts are signaled through precise numbers or methods or claims that are substantiated on paper. Even on the left side, you may have done all this, but if you do not present it properly, if you do not write it properly, then your essay or your article will not convince an academic audience, an audience that is interested in evaluating your claims, an audience that is interested in deciding whether to agree with your conclusion or not. So that's the point about this. We now move on to another aspect of academic writing, which is called signposting. Now, signpost, the term, as you can see from the screen, is derived from the kind of signs that we very often see in public spaces. So the kind of traffic signals or the signboards that you see in public streets, or within buildings, around buildings, you see a different set of signboards, which give advance information or warning, or they alert you about what is going to come. So if you see a sign which says right hand curve ahead, left hand curve ahead, hairpin bend ahead, or steep descent, or slippery road, these are very useful bits of information made available to a driver in advance so that he or she can prepare for it. He or she can drive more comfortably with the foreknowledge that this is what is going to come fairly quickly. Not 100 miles away, but within the next 10 meters or so, something is going to happen. So it alerts the driver or the person walking on a road about what lies immediately ahead. Similarly, for a person about to enter into a building or a mall, there are some signboards which indicate where a fire extinguisher is, where the exit is, or in a swimming pool, you are not allowed to swim, that is for decorative purposes, or not at this time of the day. Signboards which say, do not smoke here, or wheelchair is available, or something is fragile, or do not park, or male or female toilets, etc. And so on and so forth. I mean, don't use cell phone could be there. So all these signboards indicate to you what you should expect, what is going to be the law or the rule or the practice in a certain space. And if you know about it in advance, then you would be more comfortable. You know that this should not happen here, or this is what is expected here. So signposting in everyday life involves giving you useful information just in time. That is to say, just before it actually reaches you. In all writing, but especially in academic writing, we also have signposts which are regarded as very useful ways of organizing your writing. So, for example, either in the introduction or especially in the body of the text, where you deal with facts or arguments in a systematic way. So, indicate the priority or the sequence. You say firstly, secondly, next, later, and finally. So it indicates for the reader, when you say firstly, secondly, the third point being, and finally, the reader automatically knows that there is a list coming up now. You are going to make a set of points, one after the other. So mentally, the reader is prepared for dealing with facts one after the other, one following the other. Similarly, you have to signal that you are making an argument in which you are drawing a conclusion based on some evidence you're presenting. So cause and effect relations. You use words like because, as a result, therefore, consequently, owing to. Words like this. These are signposting words which indicate how you are constructing an argument. And by constructing your argument with these tools or these skills, you are also constructing an academic essay or an academic dissertation well. If you go down this page, add information. When you say also, in addition, moreover, furthermore, compare and contrast on the one hand, on the other. Rather, this is what one finds. Things like that. Clarifying, giving examples. When you say, in other words, clarifying. For example, for instance, a case in point is. So all these indicate to your reader that you are about to present. Either a list of facts or arguments, you are going to demonstrate cause-effect relationships, you are going to compare and contrast two different things, or you are clarifying and giving examples, a list of examples. Or you may indicate that your presentation or your essay is about to end by saying, in conclusion. So things like that. These are signposting words within academic writing, which make the drive, if you like, which make the journey of your reader easy. You are organizing, you are putting these traffic signs or signboards for the reader so that the reader can pay attention to what you are presenting in the way in which you are presenting it, and can very quickly understand and evaluate what you are presenting. So signposting is a very, very important aspect of academic writing. Now, I'm coming to the end now. In my title, I had put the word aesthetics, and some of you may have found it quite odd. What's aesthetics got to do with academic writing? And maybe you thought, and to some extent it is true, that is what I've tried to do. Aesthetics is about, beautiful writing or good writing or efficient writing, attractive writing. And attractive here is it effectively organized? Is it done with some care and concern for your reader? Does it work? When you read a good piece of academic writing, you say it's beautifully argued. So in part, I mean that. That is, the core meaning of the term aesthetics is not just beauty. Today we think aesthetics is the study of beauty and the sublime. That is what it means. While that is true, you have to know that the core meaning of the term aesthetics is sensation. So whenever I say this in class, people smile at it, but it is true. If you think about it seriously, the opposite of aesthetics is anesthetic. And an anesthetic is what you encounter in a surgery ward, where a doctor will give you an injection and the sensation is deadened. For the time being, you lose sensation in the part of your body where an operation is going to happen. So anesthetic is a chemical that stops sensations. Then there is a normal thing where you receive sensations and you are busy with many things. You pay attention in a distracted kind of way. Aesthetics is a activity or a discipline or domain in which heightened consciousness of sensations. You pay specific and careful attention to poetry or paintings or nature. You pay attention to what comes across as a powerful sensation, either a good or a bad, a pleasant or an unpleasant sensation. And based on that, you arrive at certain judgments about whether something is attractive and beautiful, or sublime, or it is ugly and monstrous and terrible. So think of aesthetics in that light. It is the ability to perceive initially by your sense organs, but later with experience also by the mind. You perceive with your mind's eye, you feel with your mind's eye whether something is attractive or not, whether something, quote unquote, works or not, it touches you or not, it moves you or not. And even though it has tended to become a special domain of philosophy or art, a technical kind of a field where artworks are studied in a technical way, I also think that it applies to other fields like aesthetics of a well-designed car or a well-designed furniture or well-designed clothing or fashion. The aesthetic doesn't stop only with what is regarded as the narrow field of works of art. Anything that is designed well and executed well, with a certain economy, with a certain attractiveness or an appeal, you could say that there is aesthetics involved there. And I would even say that especially includes academic writing as well. Given the earlier discussion we saw about bad kinds of academic writing, just jargon filled and deadening and boring, you can have academic writing which pays attention to the kind of issues that we have discussed today, and yet make an effort to share with other kinds of good writing. Aspects which would make even is academic writing interesting, attractive, moving. pleasant. It generates a pleasant experience in the reader. So that is what I meant by putting some aesthetics into academic writing, not just going to MLA style sheet or APA or Chicago Manual of Style. This is what most teachers tell their research students. Go there, learn how to do indenting, learn how to do footnoting. All those are important. But I am hoping that in addition to doing that, any good student can learn that in, say, 2 days or 2 weeks maximum. But this other aspect of writing well, presenting well, convincing people well, involves picking up skills through practice. And when you learn to do it well, you could say that there is an aesthetics to your writing. So good aesthetic or academic writing would be well structured, as we have seen. It would be precisely argued and engaged with relevant existing scholarship. It would honestly evaluate the given evidence. Honestly here can mean many things. Honestly meaning that you are summarizing it accurately. Just because the other scholar is from a political field that you do not agree with, you do not misrepresent facts. I mean, even if the other person is right wing or left wing or something that you are not, you have to summarize their arguments accurately and then agree or disagree. So one part of honesty would be that, and the more honest you are, in the long run, you will see that your reader will trust you more. Even see, the reader is reading that scholar and you with an open mind. But if the reader finds that you're misrepresenting or you're polemically dismissive of the other scholar, then why should they trust you? So if you want to be more effective, you have to be honest to the reader also. Don't just think that your contempt for opposite camp scholar should overwhelm what you owe to the reader. So honesty here is not a moral issue. It's an aspect of good writing. So even when, or especially when you are dealing with somebody you disagree with, make sure that you are summarizing that person accurately. The other part of honesty, of course, is to avoid, say, things like plagiarism. I'm not getting into it in this lecture, but where you are careful to acknowledge your sources, you are careful in engaging with it. I mean, not just putting quotation marks and dumping it in your work, also acknowledging the importance of that work, what part of it you are taking forward. So, honest evaluation of other people's arguments and the evidence that you are presenting for the reader, that is part of the aesthetics of academic writing, as far as I am concerned. To arrive at a fair and convincing concluding judgment, and the respect with which all the above points indicates a certain respect for your community of peers. All this is worth doing because your audience is worth this effort, is worth this honesty, is worth this, what may initially seem to be a lot of hack work, but this hack work is careful analysis. It is arriving at conclusions that are well founded, and if something is well founded, it will stand much longer. Now, can good writing be learned? This is where I'm going to conclude my part of the presentation. Well, some parts of it can be learned, as this set of quotations shows. The idea, Stephen King, who is a very popular novelist, some of you may have read him, he says that the idea that someone can tell you how to create is ridiculous. Certainly, you can learn structure, format, discipline, and truths of the trade. That can be learned. That part can be learned, and constant practice will help you improve that skill. But King then goes on to say, but even my grandfather, who had more than 30 of his books published, could never give me the secret of how to make a good, solid story. Joseph Epstein, and there's a number of people who make this rather convincing point, I think, that writing cannot be taught, though it can be learned. Nobody can teach you how to write well, but you can learn it yourself. If you combine the points that are made in these two quotations, there are certain things that you can learn. Think of it like, Sachin Tendulkar, even after 20 years going back to the nets and practicing every day, even after having scored all those centuries and runs, there are still things to learn and to improve and to perfect. And if you keep doing it, when you look back, you would see that how you wrote when you started your academic career, that can be much, much, much improved if you keep at it regularly, if you keep doing the equivalent of net practice regularly. Then at the end of 5 years or 10 years, you will see that you write much better, more confidently, more at ease, more eloquently even, but always precisely, convincingly, fairly, honestly. So these are the key things that are required in academic writing. But is that enough? Shouldn't something else also come in? Say, for example, when Malcolm Muggeridge says, only dead fish swim with the stream, should you only keep doing what everybody else has been doing? Or should you show some panache, some style, some freedom? But freedom to bend rules when you know the rules and when you have learned the rules very well works better. If you don't know the rules and you keep bending or breaking them, then you will make a lot more mistakes. Whereas if your basic technique is very good, your skill set is fully in place, and then when you innovate, the chances of you innovating more successfully increase manifold. So just keep this idea in mind that only if you do regular hard work in learning and relearning the basics can at some point you hope to innovate and be more creative even in academic writing. The final point with which I will stop is education is not a waste of time, and education is also not something to laugh at others with. Education should teach you confidence, and it should also teach you humility. It is the ability to listen to almost anything without losing your temper. That is, when you disagree with somebody, you should be able to listen to that person, assess it, evaluate it, arrive at your judgment, and hopefully make a polite argument with relation to that, or leave it. So, without losing your temper or your self confidence. That is to say, if your teacher or some scholar who you admire very much, the point of education is not to feel I can never teach like that or I will never be able to write like that. You should still have confidence. There is something I can learn from this, something that I can do. If not like that person, in my own way, I can do it as best as I can. So that is what I would say is the kind of creativity that you should develop after you have mastered the basic skills. The basic skills can be mastered by everybody. It's just a question of giving it time and committing to it. Being comfortable with your relationship to it. Why does it matter? In what way does it matter? And if it matters, then how do you go about learning it? Okay. So I will stop now with this. And if there are any questions that you have, or if there are any comments that you have.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir, for your lecture. It was very interesting, and the slides you have shown us gave us new perspective towards academic writing. And we are grateful for the time and effort you took to share your thoughts with us. Thank you so much once again, sir.
Thank you.
And we have a couple of questions, sir. The first question is by Salma Naushid. The question is, please share a few examples of sample writings that academics and research scholars need to write before their research work writing to develop better creativity and critical thinking and grow interest in writing skills. Shall I repeat, sir?
No, I got it, Subhash. Salma, to you, thank you for that question. And I know that when you are starting to do research, this is the most important question. Now, if this were a face-to-face classroom workshop, I would definitely have brought with me certain handouts. Before giving you examples, I would have made you, improve certain writing tasks. I would have given you samples of some writing that somebody has done and gone through stages of improvement. But let me say, since this is an online lecture, I can't share samples of it online in this way. Let me tell you what I tell my students. I am now, guiding at any point in time around 4 or 5 PhD students and even MA dissertations. One thing which I say is that first have a set of things in your mind. What are you studying? What are you exploring? What are you analyzing? You should be able to say it in 1 or 2 sentences. What is your research question? What is your research topic? What is your thesis? thesis not in the sense of this 500-page dissertation or whatever. What is your thesis? Meaning, what is the key point that you are going to study? So you have a key question or a thesis sentence. Very often you should be able to articulate it in one sentence. The minute you are able to articulate with clarity what is it that you are doing, the big advantage of that is that you know what you are not doing. Because for any given topic, you can focus on one thing, and once you find your focus, let's say you are looking at popular cinema in India, but it's such a vast field. Study of popular cinema or popular literature or women's writing is a very, very vast field. Within that, you have to make a selection. So it could be based on a certain language, it can be based on a certain geographical area. Within that, it could be based on a few authors. So you think, okay, now you have narrowed down from the vast ocean of popular cinema or women's writing, you have narrowed it down to, say, popular cinema or women's writing in the 1990s or the post the new millennium. You can say that is one kind of narrowing. Now, within that, there will still be a very vast field. You still have to narrow it down till you arrive at not your key sentence or your key topic, but you arrive at your key research questions. During this period, what were the most significant social and economic transformations or cultural transformations that were happening, based on which these are the key texts that are worth looking at, because these texts reveal those transformations or those changes in the clearest possible way. So you start with a key topic or a question, then you come up with your key research questions. Once you are clear about these two, you then have to make a statement about what is the method that is best suited to explore and expand this particular topic. So the something about the methodology that is most appropriate. Is it going to be interpretation of these films based on certain keywords or contexts that are used by a set of scholars? And you have to then name who those scholars are. Or is it going to be based on fieldwork and group interaction or interviews with specific individuals? That will require a completely different type of methodology. Or is it going to be based on government data? So you will name the research methodology that you're going to follow and who are the key, resource points for you. Who are the key theorists? Who are the, villagers or urban young women that you are going to interact with? So who are your key informants? Or what are the sources of data? Is it going to be an archival work somewhere in the archives? Is it going to be data that is available in certain reports which you have access to? So you will have to say that I am going to look at this and this and this in order to study this problem. And you also begin by assuming a certain hypothesis. Your hunch is that this is what you are going to find, but you will test that out. Once you formulate this in one paragraph at the start of research, the rest of your research is going to be either a confirmation of some of your hunches or complicating your questions, that some of the assumptions that you started with no longer hold. Don't worry about getting one sample. One or two samples are not going to help you write your dissertation well. I see and I sympathize with where you are coming from. At the start of any research, you are most curious to know, give me a model that I can follow. I am telling you, forget about following a model. Keep this basic technique in mind. You have to have a topic sentence. You have to have key research questions. You need to have a notion of what methodology is appropriate for what you are trying to explore. And you need to name for yourself at the start of your work what your assumption is, what you're hoping you will be able to confirm through your research. Then a working bibliography. Concentrate on getting this in place. Forget about good model, bad model. That is again a matter of opinion. Somebody may say Amartya Sen is a good writer and is a very. Others may say it's all. Not at all convincing. Somebody may say Kancha Ilaiah is very convincing and important. Others may say it's just polemics. There's nothing there. So I cannot give you, unless I can see your research proposal, I can't tell you what is a model to look at. And these models may change. I mean, as research happens, you may leave one particular model behind and move ahead. If you were to use an analogy from cricket, what is a model? I mean, it's like asking, who should I bat like? There is no one model. There are different people who are effective in different ways, right? And each batsman himself, if he is to stay or she is to stay successful over a long period, changes their method. As the kind of your opposition has figured you out, then you have to change your technique so that you can remain successful. So even for a researcher, you get your basic points right, and then you know how to innovate, how to adapt. But if you are hung up on one model, then your capacity to innovate is not very successful. If I know your field of research, I can say, okay, if you have not read this writer or if you have not read this article, please go and read it. It will give you a sense of how to map the field. If you are not sure about your writing style, now maybe your supervisor, after looking at your writing, can make a suggestion. But at the moment, just say asking for sample is like asking a doctor, can you suggest some medicines for me? It will be good for my health. I can't. It would be irresponsible to suggest. I hope I have taken your answers, your question seriously. I'm not dismissing what you're saying.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you. And there is one more question, sir, by Ejaz Ahmad. Can generalized probability distribution a listable research objective? Can generalized probability distribution a listable research objective?
Well, this comes from the field of quantitative research. I must admit, I am not an expert in this field, so I do not want to give you false answers. But if your own work is going to be based on quantitative research, and it's in sociology or economics or biometrics or fields of that kind, you have to look at what you regard as the best possible research books on that field and figure it out. See, no methodology by itself. I can tell you on the basis of qualitative research. It is not as if qualitative research per se is better or worse than quantitative research. It is not as if qualitative research is one methodology. Within qualitative research, there are a number of approaches in general, but in particular for your own research topic or dissertation subject, you will have to find the kind of qualitative research that is most suitable for it. In fact, the more research you do, by the end of your first or second year, you will forget all about qualitative and quantitative research. You will have a direct connect with what is at stake in the research that you're doing. Why does this matter? Once you hit that zone, all these questions about is it reliable or is it convincing in a general kind of way will move to the margins. What will take center stage is after you have got the basic skills in place. I mean, don't do it arrogantly. Don't do it, with bluster. Do it with care. Once you are sure that you understand the protocols of research, then have a close and intimate connection with the topic of your research. Your research methodology will evolve from that. Don't fit your research to some pre-existing model. If you're serious about your research topic, you will find what is the right and convincing way to work on the problem and to move towards a solution. Forget about when Tendulkar is batting, for example, he is not thinking about data or technique or something. After a certain way, he knows his body will do the thing. So in research also, you have to, a trained singer can innovate. A trained singer can innovate. A singer who is not trained is likely to make mistakes. But if your basic skills are in place, you know yourself and you know the field, you know it's okay. Okay, this is the way the field is set. This is the way the bowler has been bowling. This is where the gaps are. This is the way the wind is blowing. If I do a reverse sweep now, or if I move away from the wicket and try something, I may be able to pull it off. But when a batsman does this, he's not sitting and planning it consciously. I mean, the previous day, he is looking at the field, he's sensing how the wind is, he's looking at how the bowler is holding the ball. All these observations give him a sense of what is the right thing to attempt. I mean, he may fail, but that's okay. I mean, over a long period, if you take your knowledge forward, you will succeed. So while you are starting your research, you are very anxious to know what the right method is, which is a good thing. You learn it seriously. But in due course, forget about the rightness or wrongness of a method. Make sure you have the necessary skills in place. After that, you are the method. I mean, it may sound arrogant, but be like a cricketer, be like a singer, be like a poet. The distinction between method and research should lessen. I mean, they should blend into each other. I know it's an abstract answer, but you have to trust me on this.
Thank you, sir. The next question is by Rehman Kadri. The question is, can photographs be used in academic writings or thesis?
I would be happy if Amatur Rahman told me the answer. What does he think? Does he think it cannot be used? Why not? I mean, people increasingly use it. In fact, there's a whole field called visual cultural studies or visual studies now. It can be used, but if the question is, and this is interesting, I mean, there has been a PhD dissertation that was submitted and awarded in the field of design, where the entire dissertation is in the form of a graphic novel. It has been awarded a degree. Whether it would happen in MANUU or EFL University, I am not very sure. Because here, for us, a dissertation still means that it has to have a certain structure, citation, and scholarship, and primary resources, secondary resources, footnotes, bibliography, etc. But increasingly, say, film studies, for example, and I guide a lot of dissertation which is based on that. You have, screen grabs, stills from pictures. There are PhD dissertations on Amar Chitra Katha, on popular advertisements, for example, and how they mediate consumer society, consumer desire, neoliberal economics. So they do use a lot of photographs taken from magazines and newspapers, and photos taken by people in streets about commercial hoardings, film posters. Yeah, surely. I mean, it depends on what field you're working on. And if that is presented as evidence and you discuss it, I don't see why it cannot be used.
Thank you, sir. This last question, sir. What are the examples of critical reading?
Okay, that's it. Okay. Critical reading, again, see, if you are a BA or an MA student, then there is a syllabus that somebody else makes and gives you. If you are a research scholar, you have to construct your critical readings. Somebody can give you at the beginning, say, you need to be familiar with a certain style sheet. You have to be familiar with the key research methods, quantitative, qualitative, field work, what are the protocols involved. Whichever field you're researching in, every researcher should have an idea of the entire thing. Like in cricket, you would say you are going to be an opening batsman. But while you're learning the game, you need to know all the rules. I mean, what is a no ball, what is a wide. Even though you are not a bowler, you need to know that in order to take advantage of it. Or be familiar with what will happen if a no ball comes. Like that in research, even if you are not going to do any field work, you have to know what the possibilities are, and if required at some point, you should be able to do it. So, at the most interesting and productive research courses, my view is that it is not very helpful to have a suitable for all kind of critical reading list. You tell me your topic, you tell me what your arguments are, what arguments you're interested in making, where you would like to push towards. If you tell me that, I can tell you what would be the most useful readings. But without a knowledge of that, I would be in the position of a doctor who is being asked, give me some medicines. I have some headache, give me some medicine. It's at that level. Really, experienced doctor will not give you medicines like that. Some may say that it just shows you're an incompetent doctor, but so be it. I'm just saying that at the highest level, your research is your research. It is not like research in general, which everybody will do and everybody should do. That is okay till the BA or MA level, where even the teachers sometimes are not allowed to design a syllabus in many Indian universities. So syllabus is designed by somebody and imposed, and then there is an examination question that will be asked. So the teacher cannot really teach what he or she is interested in. The teacher and the student has to cover a syllabus, which is what most of the Indian educational system does. We cover syllabus. But real research, I mean, if you want to be a serious researcher, you have to kick that ladder away a little bit. Take yourself seriously. Be confident. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Learn to trust yourself. But trusting yourself means doing hard work. So go out, read what seems to be the relevant books. Go to books which excite you. I think excitement is a very important part of research. Something should excite you. Don't be overpowered by somebody's jargon or fame or something like that. If that work doesn't excite you, then it is not for you. You have to be excited or sometimes irritated by something. That can also lead to good research. I mean, some of the best feminist work, for example, has happened because people have been irritated with something in their daily life for a long time. So the research is not an expression of their irritation. It is the sublation, if you like. It's the taking forward in a serious way of making sure that I will not let this happen to my daughter. Or women will have a better life if I can help it. They will not have to go through what I went through. Which, I mean, will involve scrupulous scholarship, a lot of hard work, but it will be animated by something true and authentic, not just a desire to impress people with dropping names or references. So I would say that the best kind of research in my experience has happened when somebody is very excited by something or very troubled and irritated by something. They come with real questions and they contribute new knowledge, because these are things others have not worked on. Others have played safe or played indifferent and have not worked on things which matter to somebody. So if something matters to you, you have to ask, does it matter only to me or does it matter to a wider community? It doesn't have to be everybody, but does it matter to a significant section of India or the world? And if so, then it's valid and useful research.
Thank you so
So
much.
reading list will evolve from that. It will evolve from your connection with your topic.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. Before closing this session, I would like to read one comment posted by our student Mudassir. So,
Okay.
your lecture turned out to be vast sea of sanity for us rather than a bit of madness in methodology. It's a wonderful talk. Thank you so much, sir. So,
Okay.
thank you
Thank you,
so much.
Mudas. And lovely
We'll
to
be in
know.
touch with you, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, Subhash, and bye, Subhash and Salma. Bye. It was fun. I hope it was useful.
Yeah, sir. It was. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, sir. Dear students, we'll meet tomorrow at sharp 2:30 again.